All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the session. Happy Sunday. Let's see here. Can everyone hear me? Let me just test my thing here. Can people hear me? But can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me. Okay. All right, good. Gary, can you hear me?
Okay, now I can.
Can you hear me now? Okay. But can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me. Okay. All right, good. All right, I'm gonna turn off your video. And mic. All right, sorry about that, folks. Just a little bit of technical trouble. Gary, I'm gonna leave your chat text thing up. All right. Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay, so where were we? All right, here we are. Let me just check my Facebook Live. Facebook Live seems to be working. All right, great. All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday. Thanks for coming in. Welcome to our Sacred Space session. So I'm super excited. Happy to have you all here with us. Is the chat text sacred space? Yes, please. Everything, all the communication here is sacred space. So, and I'll re-explain what we mean by that. So I just want to say that, as always, I am honored to be with you here in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty, and I look forward to sharing time with you in our sacred space here together today. And what we're going to do today in our time together in sacred space is, the last few weeks have been heavy, and rightfully so. And this week, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to talk about healing. And there was kind of one more theme that I wanted to talk about coming out of everything we've been touching on in the past few weeks. And then we will bridge a little bit more into a sacred space exercise that will involve a story that will tie into the healing, but then will kind of move us back into our a little bit back into our sort of healing, nerdy, mythopoetic kind of mode that we've been in all throughout, but kind of moving back into that stream. So what we'll do today is I'll set sacred space. We'll talk about our topic for today, which is restoration of the feminine and the healing of the world. Okay. And then we will then have a story, a kind of mythopoetic story from Hindu tradition about the power of the feminine. And then that'll be it. And then we'll have our blessing and we'll close sacred space. I'm thinking that if you have questions, go ahead and post them. Gary, my editor, is collecting the questions. And I think probably next week, it will be about time where we have enough questions to have a separate session to cover them. Okay. So then let me just make sure Facebook is live. Okay, it looks like everything's working. All right. Yay. So what I'll do now is I'll set sacred space and we'll begin. So this together, all of us, is a space devoid of fear, threat, and control, intended for us to be able to open to higher guidance from within our own selves. We intend for this to be a safe sanctuary space for us all to relax and surrender with no danger or threat, so that we can partake of the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And in opening sacred space today, I am proposing that we all follow the principles of Presidian sacred space. So the 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. Number 1, confidentiality via, so we're online, so the video will be replayed, posted, the chat is readable by anyone over time. So the way we do confidentiality is through anonymization. So you would go into your Crowdcast profile, and I'm not tracking the comments in real time on Facebook. You can leave comments that I'll reply to them later. But to ask a question, you would go into Crowdcast, anonymize your profile, edit your profile, and just make your username, Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter or something. And then you would ask your question anonymously. So confidentiality. Number 2, no threat or controlling, no fixing, no tough love. We're here to hold space for each other, to be afraid, to be anxious, to be angry, or to be happy and relaxed. And then however we are, just as we find ourselves, to be okay with that and to hold space for that without trying to intervene, fix, cure, recommend, improve. There's nothing wrong with all that, but that's in that space of control, fear, and threat. You better read this book or else you're not going to have your pain relief, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but that's in a different mode. That's in the profane world. And when we're back out there, we'll sort of share recommendations and all the rest of it. But here in the sacred space, it's a different mode of being. And you need both, right, as we've been saying all along. So here we are to hold space for each other. The third principle is no commerce, right, as a corollary. So as a result, nothing may be sold or recommended or suggested, whether it's free or paid or whatever, right? We are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. In other words, we're here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. We treat each person as an end in and of themselves, not as a means to an end. And a means to an end could be, I'm selling you something to make money off of you, or a means to an end could be, I'm recommending something, out of the goodness of my own heart, but I feel good because I feel useful now that I've recommended something and I feel like an authority. So we don't do any of that, right? No commerce, no recommendations. And then the fourth is, again, a corollary. There's no expectation of participation. There's no pressure to do anything. The nourishment here comes from the held space and your presence and attention from what you are, not from what you do or provide. So if you're on your phone during the thing, if you're bored and you're clicking around on your computer, right, that's okay. If you're like, oh, you need to pick up the kids or go, do laundry or whatever, and you need to leave, people will often in the chat say, oh, sorry, I'm going to head out now. That's perfectly okay. But you don't have to. You don't have to do that. You just come and go as you please. And the nice thing about having, probably, a couple hundred of us at any given time in the live session, holding space is that we can all just come and go. The held space is persistent because of our collective presence. And that's part of, one of the lovely things. And all of us together will tend to amplify that. So then this is what I am proposing in terms of the space we are about to move into. And if you are not okay with that, that's okay. We will give you a moment now to withdraw from the group. And we'll just catch you later in profane space. We'll still hang out. We'll have a latte. We'll talk about all our things. No worries at all. In other words, there's no fear, threat, or control for you to even remain in this space with us. I'm just kind of giving you the heads up. We're about to step in. And if you're not okay with that for any reason, that's okay. And we'll give you a moment now to make your sovereign decision and step in or out. Okay. So for now, we will move together into sacred space. So now we are in sacred space together, and the 4 principles here are confidentiality, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce, no expectation of participation. Yeah, the thing on the soft camera focus, it may be, I can see myself clearly. It may be a connection issue. You may try a refresh on your browser. It may be a connection issue on my side. I'm not sure. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about our main topic first. And that is that the title we picked was Restoration of the Feminine and the Healing of the World. Now, last week we talked about the mythopoetics of the wound of racism in America. And one of the things we said was that the Black man, right, mythopoetically can be regarded as the frog of America, right, of American society. The frog being the exiled one who actually holds all the power of healing and blessing and reconciliation and redemption. And when I say frog here, I'm referring specifically to the frog image and symbol from the Frog King, from the Frog King Grimm Brothers fairy tale that I often tell in a healing context. If you'd like a link for that, the resource page for last week's session on American racism and our call to destiny will have a link to the full Frog King story that I told years ago, and then the sort of debriefs and explanations I gave after that. Okay. And what I said, I think a week or two ago, was that if the Black man is the frog of American society, then by analogy, right, woman, not just Black women, but women overall, right, this sort of role of woman in society, the archetype of woman, the person of woman, is the frog of the world. And American society included, but the frog of the world. Okay, so you'll remember that. I'm just kind of recapping that. In addition, in last week's session, we talked about the archetype of blessing and curse, right, in the mechanics of wounding. And today, in talking about the restoration of the power of the feminine, what I want to try and do is I want to try and tie these two things together. In other words, the loss/exiling, right, of the feminine in our world, connected to the perpetuation of curse in our world, blessing versus curse. So when we talked about blessing and curse, we were talking about why the cursed try to extract from the blessed, right, something, anything that will heal this sort of wound, this feeling of emptiness, this hole, this emotional, spiritual, soulful hole within them. And the way they will do that is because they're of the cursed, right? They have never been pulled aside, and certain things have just never been explained to them. They are uninitiated, right? All the toxic men that you see running around in the world are uninitiated men who have never been inducted into their proper role in the world and society of, you know, what a man is supposed to do, not just in sort of a specific culture, but overall as part of the collective experience of humanity. Ernest Hemingway, the author, had much to say about this, actually, but he once quipped and famously referred to them as, in American society anyway, as the great American boy men, right? Uninitiated men who just are lost. They lack vision, and they're just going around with inherited privilege, right? Pissing on everything and destroying everything. So when you are a member of the cursed, you will find yourself, right, at the home, at the hut, at the house of someone who is blessed, and you have led yourself there through the scent. You smell the blessing on them. You don't know what it is. You've never had it, right? But then if all you know is fear, threat, and control, because you have not been blessed, you have not been brought into the sacred, those are the tools you will use, right? So you show up and try to accost them. You try to extract, right, whatever it is in them. You don't realize it's blessing. Or if I say it's blessing, you say, well, how do I get this then? How do I extract this? Can I go to the pharmacy and buy a bottle of this, drink it, and be done with it? Right? And the answer is obviously no. So they attack and accost blessed through fear, threat, and control. And this, we talked about how this leads to the wounds that we have today. At every level of society, at the mythopoetic religious, down to the national, down to the international, down to the societal, down to the level of, between individuals, and then even within an individual, right? Whether you're, whatever gender you declare outwardly, right? Within us, we all have inner masculine and inner feminine, and we'll talk about that today. There are, in a manner of speaking, parts of your inner world that are blessed and parts of your inner world that are cursed. And they interact within you as well. So the question then is, what does this curse look like? And what is it that makes up a curse? So a curse is where you are wounded, or you have a wound, and you cannot heal it. Right? You cannot heal it. And typically it is the thing that you have cut off from yourself, the frog that you have exiled, that you've said, I'm going to use you to try to get the thing I need back. But once I get this thing back that I think is all I need, I'm going to renege on my deal with you, the frog. This is the Princess and the Frog story. We all know this from childhood. I'm not going to keep my promise, and I'm going to run away from you. And as long as I push the frog away, there is no redemption or blessing for me, because the nature of being cursed is that the very thing that you have cut off from yourself when you sustain the wound is also the very thing, the only thing that can actually heal you. The thing you have cut off is the source of the healing, right? And so the only way to heal is to go and recover this lost part of you, to recover the frog back to you. And there's no way of recovering the frog that is in the sort of lens and mental framework of conquest and being right and morally sort of indignant, and conquering them to force them to come back to you, right? That's all still within the realm of the profane. The only way to recover this part of you back to you is through the realm of the sacred, which is love, nurturing, and surrender. But the larger word for this is through the lens not of conquest and domination, but of reconciliation, right? Reconciliation, conciliation, nurturing, and ultimately surrender to the frog. Okay. And in this context, at the global level, the cut off part is the feminine. The frog is the feminine, right? So it is like a double whammy, because the feminine is also, interchangeable. It's part and parcel with what we conceive of as the sacred. Right? And we know that healing only happens in the sacred, right? There's no healing that happens in the profane. Curing happens in the profane, right? When you force sort of the pain to go away by suppressing it, by masking it, by literally you take a painkiller and you kill the pain. You don't reconcile with it, right? If the pain is a message, you burn the message, you burn the FedEx envelope. You don't actually open it and read it and have a changing of your heart, a changing of your mind, metanoia, right? An awakening, a realization. So in this entire state of affairs, it's like a double whammy. When you cut off the feminine in a patriarchy as we live in, you not only lose this valid part of yourself and become cursed and wounded, but it just so happens that the very part of you that is cut off is also the key to healing. Not just you, but any healing. Right? It's almost like, let's cut off an entire portion of society, and that portion you cut off is actually the healer. Right? If you said, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, let's ration and choose a segment of the population which will get no masks, no antibiotics, no antivirals, no food, no money, and just put them on a raft and set them out to float in the middle of the ocean. And the segment we choose are all our physicians, nurses, and healthcare workers. So it's like a double whammy. You are cursed because you've cut off a part of yourself. And the second whammy is the part that you cut off was your only hope of healing. And so when you cut off the feminine, it's a double whammy, because the feminine is the sacred. It is the healing part of you. Which is why the task of healing at the individual level, at the world level, in this day and age is so simple, and yet at the same time so devilishly difficult as well. I mean, the idea at a high level is, well, all you have to do is recover the feminine. Hand her the keys to the bus of your life and everything will be fine. But that is exactly the hardest thing to do. Exactly the hardest thing to do. So what I want to do next is I want to talk a little bit about the nature of the feminine and then the levels of its suppression in our world, just to give you a kind of survey. Okay. And then it will beg the question of, well, all right, Artie, you know, you're so smart and you've made us feel like heels about all of this. All right. You know, like when I talk to some of my, you know, male clients, right, and I take them through all this, and like, well, I feel like a piece of crap. So what do I do now? Do I get her flowers? What do I do? And like, all right, let's like talk about that next. So we will talk about that as well, and we will do a little bit of a kind of nerdy a demonstration, if you will, an attempted demonstration of how to bring back the feminine on multiple levels with our story that Gary will take us through. So when I do healing, I will often talk about inner masculine, inner feminine. And I want to just, because I'm anticipating all these questions. When you've done 7-day healing, this exposition of inner masculine, inner feminine is not in the main program. It's only when you're in live group advising and you ask a certain question, you participate, and you know, a certain kind of dream comes up, that I will pull out my explanation of inner masculine, inner feminine. It's just how it's grown up organically. As we do an overhaul of our work, we will start to bring inner masculine, inner feminine into the core of the programs. I mean, IMIF, inner masculine, inner feminine, is all over the relationship program. But basically, it's an outgrowth of the work, and we're slowly figuring out how to work it back in. But in a session, in a talk like this, it's front and center. So in my work, the sort of notions of inner masculine and inner feminine figure quite strongly, especially when we're doing detailed work and when we're talking about dreams. Now, for me, for a while, I tried to call it a more politically correct terminology, because inner masculine, inner feminine is a bit gendered. It's not completely gendered. It's not inner male, inner female. It's inner masculine, inner feminine. Okay, and there is a bit of a difference there. So I tried calling it yin yang, soft hard, light dark, right? Moist and dry, all these sort of different ways, alternate, attemptingly non-gendered sort of forms. But the problem I kept running into is when people would have dreams, these different elements would just show up as gendered forms. They would show up as your ex guy, right? It would show up as your mother. It would show up as a kitten. It would show up as a wolf, right? And that's still gendered in the sort of overall principled level. So after a while, I just kind of relented and I just kind of rolled with it. And so, and the other thing is that when I talk about inner masculine and inner feminine, I'm talking about principles within you that we basically are attempting to put a name to. And every human, regardless of outer gender, has inner masculine, quote unquote, and inner feminine, quote unquote, strands within them, right? And let's just keep it simple, a man and a woman. A man will have inner masculine and inner feminine. I have inner masculine, inner feminine. And a woman has inner masculine and inner feminine too. And because of societal norms and everything, as a man, I may have had my feminine suppressed and my masculine more set forward. As a man, I could have my feminine brought forward and my masculine suppressed, and similarly with the case of a woman. And this kind of unlocks all the stuff about your pattern, your behavior pattern, how you interact in relationships. If a man is like inner feminine suppressed with a woman who is also inner feminine suppressed, what kind of, you know, all the different, there's a grid I actually do in the relationships program where all of this is kind of brought out into often agonizing detail. But I'll spare you that. We won't do that today. And the idea here is that classically, from my own observation, and also just from traditional, you know, classical tradition, there are roles and functions that what we're calling the inner masculine and the inner feminine tend toward, right, in their natural kind of zuran, in their natural sort of way of flowing. And with inner feminine, I'll describe each one in turn right now. So with inner feminine, it's all the things you hear from society, but with a couple of extra things. So inner feminine, yes, it is soft, it is nurturing, it is yielding, receptive. It's not the mountains, it's the valley. It's not the thing that stands up, it's the thing that, it's the ground of being, right? All these things. So yes, it's all that. And those are all the things that the patriarchy will emphasize as well, because it's very convenient. It's like passive and we just use it as we wish. That's an extra leap that the patriarchy takes, right? But in addition, in my experience, in my own life and the tens of thousands of people I've worked with, the role of the inner feminine, in addition to all that, is that the inner feminine is also the holder of vision. The inner feminine is the holder of vision. Okay. And I don't have time in our session today to get into a whole lot of detail, but if you think about why we think of feminine as like soft and receptive and sort of sensitive and multitasking, it's not because she's weak, right? It's because it's almost like this sensitive, long-range, deep space radar dish that needs to open, right? In order to receive the signal of basically vision of anything, of an individual, of a society, of you know, a corporation, anything, right? And you can't be open like we are here in sacred space, right? We're totally open, we're surrendered, and also protect ourselves at the same time, right? That's the role of the inner masculine, but we'll get to that. That's why in sacred space here, right, we can come into this space. I am kind of the ritual elder, kind of facilitator of the sacred space. I'm the network operator, as we say in high tech, right? But in order to have this space where we're all protected and we feel comfortable surrendering, right, to receive the vision of the inner feminine, there's a bit of work that has to go. I'm like, you know, I'm pretty strict about like no recommendations and keeping the chat clean and everything, but all of those boundaries are clear, right, so that we can have this softness within. And it's a long way of saying you need both. You need both, and they need to work in this beautiful harmony. So vision comes from the inner feminine, right? Vision comes from the inner feminine. Inner masculine, then, all the things you hear about in patriarchy, yes, strong and assertive, but the function, the purpose of quote unquote inner masculine. And again, every human being, regardless of gender, has both within them. I always have to continuously repeat this, because then people are like, well, what are you saying about women? What are you saying about women? I'm not saying anything about what men or women. Any given man or woman has both, and it's the mix within them that makes the difference for any given man or woman. But classically, the core function, the reason for being of the inner masculine is twofold. The first is you use that strength and assertion, right, even physically, for boundary control. Right? Someone needs to control the boundaries of the temple so that vandals don't come in the middle of our sacred space and start messing with things. Right? We have to feel safe. So boundary control is typically inner masculine. And then the second function is outward. I think of it as, once you have the vision, you're protecting the space so you receive the vision. Once you receive the vision, you've got to implement. And that may mean aggressing outside of your boundaries to like acquire more sort of resources or make treaties with the sort of neighboring villages or whatnot. So implementation. So the fancy word for that is manifestation. So inner masculine is in charge of implementation and manifestation out in the physical world outside of you. So vision, boundary control, and then manifestation. The image I always use is like, so there's an inner masculine and the inner feminine. And the inner feminine is basically like the CEO, the visionary CEO. And the inner masculine is more like the COO, the chief operating officer. They're basically equal. He'll come back and say, no, we need to go in this roundabout way to fulfill your vision because of the practical boulders and roadblocks that are out there. And she'll say yes, and she'll hold everyone true to the actual vision to make sure, however we need to do it in the practical world, we actually finally get there. So she'll say something like, okay, I need you to go out and clear this patch of forest because that's where we're going to make our home. And she says, go. And he goes out and, clears the forest. And then, ex post facto, he's like, oh yeah, we're backed by a mountain and we're above the other. And there's a stream here with fresh water. This is a great choice. And she's like, yeah, great. Okay, now the next thing I need you to do. So it's like vision and implementation, all within a single person. A great example I always think of just from tech is like Apple Computer, right? In its phase where the iPhone was in ascendancy and everything, it was Steve Jobs who was the visionary, and he's inner feminine, right? He's the inner feminine visionary of Apple Computer. And it was Tim Cook, right, who actually had to run the factories in like southern China and all the nastiness that had to ensue to actually make these beautiful objects that reflected the vision of the founder, right? Now I'm not saying that Apple's good or bad. I'm just using as a sort of functional example. So inner feminine is vision, nourishment, and nurturing. And inner masculine is boundary protection and manifestation. So that's the way you think about it. And now we all have both, regardless of our outer declared gender, right? And in any given person, their inner masculine can be suppressed. And if inner masculine is suppressed in a man, he exhibits certain characteristics. And if inner masculine is suppressed in a woman, she will tend to exhibit certain characteristics. And then vice versa, if inner feminine is suppressed in a man, he'll have certain characteristics. And if inner feminine is suppressed in a woman, she will have a certain profile as well. When you read dreams or look at the stories, and we'll have a great mythic story that Gary will take us through after this. One of the ways you figure out like what is even going on with the inner masculine, inner feminine is to look at the quote unquote masculine or feminine figures in the dream. How do they appear symbolically? Does the masculine show up as a dog or as an elephant or as your dad or your stupid ex-husband, right? How does it appear? Or your brother or your son? Same for the feminine. What are they actually doing? What are they saying? What are they wearing? What colors do they have? And then who is doing what to whom? You hit play on the action and see like what is happening in the skit of a dream. Who is doing what to whom? And the message is typically encoded in that. And we'll see a fine example of this in our mythic story today. So anyway, in a healthy, full-powered person, you need both inner masculine and inner feminine. Inner feminine is vision. Inner masculine is implementation and manifestation power. If I lose my inner feminine and exile her, and she's the frog, and I suppress her for all kinds of reasons, I end up typically, man or woman, being super busy implementing, manifesting, doing all these things, but there's no vision. There's no higher plan. Right? The description you always get is, I'm running around doing busy work, fighting fires all day long. I mean, I'm making a ton of money and everything's fine, but I have no freaking idea where I'm going with my life. I have no higher purpose, and I feel like everything's just like pointless. Right? And from the outside, you're like, oh, your life is perfect. What's the problem? And it's like, I have no idea why I'm doing what I'm doing. I have no idea why I'm even here. Okay. Now, in the other extreme, if you lose inner masculine, you have no boundary protection. Hey, Gary, I think your microphone's on.
Sorry.
if I lose inner masculine, I have no boundary protection and no manifestation, right? But I have great vision, right? So I'm this idle dreamer. I build castles in the sky, but I have no capability of bringing it down to earth and actually, holding a boundary with the outer world to make sure I don't get walked all over, right? And actually manifesting, like getting things done, making money, making alliances, getting job interviews, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's at the individual level. At the societal level now, when we talk about restoration of the feminine, we are in a 2,500 year old patriarchy. Okay, it just is what it is. So the thing that is suppressed at a macro level is the feminine. Now I'm already at minute 40, so I want to get moving here, but just very quickly, at the macro level, the patriarchy is driven by our Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, right? The three religions that worship the God of Abraham. So Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all worship the same God, Allah, Yahweh, the God of Abraham. And this is not a criticism. I'm just kind of describing it as it is. I was raised Catholic, I'm all with that, right? There's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything intrinsically wrong. But in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it's kind of funny and adorable that I even need to point this out. But there's no goddess. There's no goddess in this tradition. It's a very curious phenomenon, right? There's only God. And if there's no goddess, you could just say God has no gender. But no, we go the next step, of course. We actually go there and we say God is male and God is the father. But there's no mother. Why isn't there any mother? Detention, Artie Woo detention after school. It's like, okay, I guess I won't ask that question again next time. Right, so there is a female figure, right? There's in the Christian tradition, for instance, there's a Virgin Mary. And in the Judeo tradition, there's Shekinah, which is like an add-on afterward, right? As kind of a bone you throw to the masses. And the Virgin Mary is very, very explicitly not a goddess, even though she's somehow the mother of God, but she herself cannot be a goddess. She's just a passive vessel. And that value system just ripples through the whole thing, right? Whether you're religious or not, I mean, it's the foundations, the cornerstones on which our entire civilization is built, at least for the past 2,000 years. And it's long enough for me, right? At the micro level, then, we have inequality, violence, and abuse, denial of rights, denial of agency. And there's a whole, I mean, I can talk for the rest of my life on that topic. But in the, and let me just put this here so you have it. Where are we here? In the resource page of for this session, well, it's not really sure. There's only a single item that I put there, and that is a YouTube talk by former American President Jimmy Carter. And it's just I'll just dump it in the chat as well. It's basically just like a 20-minute TED talk, actually, where he just holds forth on why he thinks the biggest sort of human rights sort of crisis on the planet is the suppression and mistreatment and abuse of women and girls. So he says it better than I ever could. And I won't even play it here. We don't have time. And I can't watch the thing without... I can't even watch the thing without getting very emotional. So I will sort of refer you to that to fill in what I would have said here to give the detail. So that's the micro societal level. And then in the individual inner world level, right? Inner masculine, inner feminine. The inner feminine is often suppressed within us, right? So for boys and men, we're taught to deny emotion and feeling. We're taught to deny. We're taught to not be nurturing. right? If my buddy gets hit on the football field and I go and I hold his head in my lap and I'm like, dude, it's going to be okay. Like we will both be pariahs, right? In the locker room after that. It's like horrifying, right? To think of a man doing that for another man. At least in American society, right? All the tropes of boys don't cry, where if I say you throw like a girl, it's an insult. If I say you, and this is hard, I can barely say these words, but when in certain countries and societies they say, why are you always complaining like a woman, and somehow that's an insult, right? Are used as insults to suppress the feeling function. This is like, so this is like a proud dad moment for me, and I won't get into the detail, but my son, Jonathan, who is, this gorgeous 13-year-old boy, he's had long hair for the last several years. That's why my hair is long. I look at him and I'm like, well, I don't need a haircut. If he doesn't need a haircut, I don't need a haircut. And in the first year or two of him having long hair, he's like 11 or 12, and he's just like very beautiful, child. He would always be mistaken for a girl, right? The Italian waiter at the Italian restaurant would be, Signorina, here is your like pasta. And they would be like, oh, she's so wonderful. Your daughter is really cool. And he would never react, right? And one day, some uncle of his was like, hey, John, like, doesn't it bother you that like people like mistake you for a girl all the time? And I kid you not, he just looked at the uncle, not even annoyed, but just with this total curiosity and befuddlement. And he just turned to him and he was like, I don't know, why would I have a problem with someone thinking I was a girl? And by the way, shut his uncle down pretty quickly. But the implication was that if you mistake me for a girl, I don't have a problem with it, because in my world, being a girl is not an insult and it's not inferior. Right? It's like, I'm ethnically Chinese. So if you mistake me for being Japanese or Korean, I'm not insulted because I don't regard being Japanese or Korean as being inferior. Right? So if you say, oh, are you Korean? It's like, oh, no, I'm not Korean. I'm Chinese. Right? I'm like, how could you think I'm Korean? How could you think I'm a woman? How could you think that's horrible? The implication being that women are inferior, which they're not. And John was like, he lives in a world where, that's just not the case. So he was like, yeah, why? I know, who cares? Why is that an insult? Why is that an insult? So that's with men. And then with women, the inner masculine is denied as well. Women cannot be selfish, cannot be ambitious, cannot be physically assertive, right? Cannot be too talkative, cannot manifest too much. You can't make more money than your husband. That'll create all kinds of issues. And it's like, why is that? Do we not like money? All of a sudden everything's so sacred that we don't want too much money when I'm the one making it. Right? So it's like, I can't be too bossy. And the classic trick, right? The classic trick of the patriarchy, because you have inner feminine on both levels. One is you have an inner feminine as a human being, and then secondly, you are a woman. So within society, you are the inner feminine because you are the one that looks feminine. Okay. And so the way I suppress the feminine of society is I go to her and I say, you don't have any masculine. You only have feminine. Right? So you can be nurturing and yielding and receptive. And then it's like, oh yeah, then she's the visionary. So we all do what she says. Oh, no. No. Males are visionary, but we're not. Look at the world we're in. We live in a world run by men, and it's basically on fire for the past 1,000 years. So we say men have the vision, but they obviously don't. Just look around you. There's no vision, right? But it's like, but we can't say women have the vision because then we're giving them power, and then the sort of outer composite feminine of society rises in power. We somehow can't have that. Because there is no goddess in our system, right? There's a passive vessel to bring out the masculine god, but there is no goddess. Which A is bullshit, but B, as I've said before, when you do that, you screw everyone, right? I mean, just think about the lives of men in a world like this. The lives of men suck too. I mean, we have more privilege and power and all this, but it's like what are we doing with it? Right? All we have is the profane. The world is nothing but profane. That's why it's on fire. Right? Because we have no guidance from the sacred feminine. So, you think about some of these more like sort of polarizing politicians, I'll just say, right? And different facets of society are like basically using these politicians as kind of Kleenex, right? To like sort of prove, sort of advance their own sort of ends or whatever. Nobody actually gives a flying whatever about the actual politician. And when you look at the politician, right, the leader of different countries on the world stage right now, you think, first of all, that person's really angry. And secondly, I don't like what he's doing, but also like you realize nobody wants to be that guy, right? Nobody wants to be them. I mean, their existence is just wretched. It's wretched. I mean, they're not a slave. They're not being shot and, randomly executed by like, racist police or whatever, because they're largely white men. But you still I still wouldn't want to be you because, I mean, your life is absolutely miserable. It's like filled with nothing but anger. Your health, your body like reflects that. And the feeling that you exhibit reflects that. There's just no love in that world. There's no feeling, right? So, so our world is bereft of vision as well. We suppress it in women, and then we also suppress the inner feminine in men. So men have no vision as well. And so, okay, how are we doing on time? Okay, I need to keep moving. Really quickly, obviously, at an ecological level, the exploitation of the earth, of Mother Earth, of forest, sea, soil, animals, bodies, et cetera, et cetera. And so the exile of the feminine, right, pervades all levels of our modern world. Right? This is what I mean when I say woman or the feminine is the frog, right? The exile of the world. And just like I said last week with American racism and black men, there is no blessing, there is no healing of curse, there is no reconciliation, there is no redemption until we recover at her pleasure, not forcibly, we recover, we request, right, the glory of her presence, and we reconcile with the feminine in our world. There's no other way. There's no other way. Right? So the restoration of the feminine on her terms, then, is the key to everything. Just to drop a couple of references here for folks who do work with me. In the Christian tradition, in the medieval Christian tradition, there was a school of thought that conveyed this supremacy, this forwardness of the feminine in a mythical way. But it had to be done in a very mythopoetic manner. It was coded in myth, because conveying this supremacy of the feminine in direct words was considered heretical. It was like the easiest way for you to get yourself burned at the stake, right? And the jewel of this tradition, for me and my personal travels, is the story of the Fisher King. Specifically, the Fisher King as told in the late 1100s, 1195 to 1205, by both Chrétien de Troyes and Wolfgang von Eschenbach. Okay, in the continuing healing series, if you still have access to that, I tell the story of the Fisher King in the middle of that. Where basically, long story short, the wound of the world, the unhealable wound of the world, which is a wound of castration, actually, which is very telling in this day and age, can only be healed by the restoration of the feminine. The Fisher King is a story of the Grail, of the Holy Grail. And the Grail, of course, is feminine. It's a cup, it's a womb, it's a container, it's a cauldron of transformation. Because this symbol of the cup was embedded in Christianity. It was transformed. The Grail was said to be the cup of the Last Supper that Jesus drank from, right? So that's the symbol they glommed onto to make it a symbol of the divine feminine, because you can't burn me for glorifying Jesus's chalice at the Last Supper. So that's the way they did the workaround and got past it. So when you read the Fisher King, the Grail is the divine feminine, and the quest to retain and recover the Grail is exactly this quest to recover the lost feminine, this lost sacred feminine in our world. And there are other stories that speak to that as well. All right, so that's my rant on the feminine. And so all of this then begs the question of, so, okay, fine. So say already I even buy some, little 10% of this. Let's say for the moment I'll humor you and I'll go, okay, there might be something to this that you're saying. You still haven't explained, like, okay, well, how do we restore the feminine, right? How do we do this then? And there are a couple of answers. The first is that, in a way, not to make this a sales pitch, right? All the things I teach and think about and care about and talk about are aimed at restoring the feminine in one way or another. Those of you who are doing bliss programs with me, so my own personal bliss at this point, the way I would describe it is, my job in the world is to restore the power of the sacred in our world. That's it. And that's really coded language for the feminine, because the sacred and the feminine are one and the same. So when I restore the sacred to the world, I'm essentially restoring the feminine. Healing is feminine. The reconciliation with the inner exile, the frog, is feminine, right? In the hard patriarchal Christian tradition, where do we see frogs, right? A frog, St. George and the dragon, right? The dragon is the frog. What is a frog but a little dragon? Okay. And what does St. George do to the dragon? Obviously, he does battle with it and kills the dragon, right? Exiles the dragon, suppresses the dragon, takes the pill to basically nuke the dragon, right? St. George does not nurture it, does not reconcile with it. And you have the problem of all Abrahamic religions right there. The impulse, which is then fully indulged, right, to conquest and domination, as opposed to nurturing and reconciliation. This is what happens when you exile the goddess from your religion. And God is only a father, and there is no mother. It is devoid of all warmth and humanity. If there were a goddess, she would intervene. She would like, sit down, George. Let me talk to the dragon. But in these cases, the dragon is feminine, right? She's pissed. And what comes to mind here is, as Joseph Campbell, right, once famously quipped. Joseph Campbell, the famous mythologist, the one who coined the term "follow your bliss" and all those things that we talk about. As Joseph Campbell once famously quipped, no one longs for rest and comfort in the bosom of Abraham. Right? And that's no insult. Abraham would be like, yeah, I'm not here for that. That's not what I do, right? We all want mom. We don't want dad for comfort. Okay. So the long answer is, all my stuff is how to restore the feminine. Healing is feminine. Dream work, myth and fairy tale is feminine. Bliss, following your bliss, is feminine. And this here sacred space is feminine too. And so the key for me is to surrender to the inner feminine without regard for the outcome. Right? You're like, okay, I'm going to surrender, and then you're going to bless me, right? You're going to heal me, right? You're going to make it all better, right? No. You don't go back and apologize to your mother with conditions, right? I mean, that's like the surest way of like getting sent back into the doghouse. You surrender to the inner feminine without regard for the outcome, without condition. Whether she blesses you or not, whether there is a guarantee of healing or bliss or not, you surrender to the feminine, period, without condition. And when you change this in your own inner world, blessing will tend to come. And if it doesn't come, it's probably because the inner feminine has decided, I'm working on it, but you need to jump through a few more hoops before you're even ready to receive my blessing. On another side note, this is actually related to the path of karma yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, which we may talk about at some point. Gowry's story today is actually from the Mahabharata, in which the Bhagavad Gita is smack in the middle of. Okay, and she'll explain that. But the formula of karma yoga in the Bhagavad Gita is that you act without regard for the fruit of the action. You surrender fully, right? You fully surrender first, and then you will make it through. Even with the exercises in live sacred space, the one where I say, stand in the sacred with me, right? That is an act of surrender. But at the same time, I surrender to you as well. I don't say fire and brimstone unless you stand in the sacred with me, right? I say there's no pressure to say it. Nobody forces you to say it. It's fully voluntary, only if you want. And I surrender to you this opportunity for you to surrender to your own self, to surrender to the sacred within, not to me, I don't want it, right? Surrender to the sacred within you. So it is a co-surrender, and that's why it feels so powerful in a lot of ways, most of the time, right? And the nature of this act, when you surrender to the sacred, is you surrender to the feminine, right? Everything in Preside, bliss healing, is about coming back to the feminine. That's why after a sacred space session, you come out and you're like, I really can't say why, but I just feel better after that session. That's why. The feminine has had a bit of a reprieve, a couple hours to come back up, dance her dance, and then, okay, we're going back into the profane world. It's time for you to get back in your cage. And she's like, he's like, just you wait. So the quicker you realize that, or the quicker you're like, okay, sorry, my bad, no cage, just here are the car keys, just drive. If I may, I'd still like to sit in the back seat and ride with you. Or if I need to go in the trunk, I'm happy going in the trunk. It's like, just, here are the keys, and can I come along? Can I come along? Right? It's that kind of feeling. All right. So that's all the comments I had. And so what I like to do now is I'd like to do a bit of a demonstration. And I don't really know how this will go. Gary doesn't really know how this will go. We're just kind of like, we're going to take a flyer. There are many different ways of surrendering, and so let's just have one now. So I now, as the man, right, running this session, would like to surrender in a number of ways, and I'll just list them and then I'll hand it over. One of the ways, the first way, is I want to tell a story. So I want to move away from all this linear pontificating and exposition on my part and my nerdy talk, and move more toward a holistic, imagistic, mythopoetic mode of discourse and storytelling. So we'll tell a story, no more lecture. Number two is we're going to take a story not from Western tradition, but from Hindu tradition, where the pantheon of goddesses is much more intact and powerful. The third surrender is that I'm going to yield the floor to Gary, my editor, to tell the story, who also happens to be a woman. There's just no mistake that my editor, who tells me where my out of bounds are, is a woman. 4 is to tell a story that she picked just randomly off the top of her head during our brainstorm call for this session, given by her muse. And we were both like, we don't know how this story actually fits into the theme, but we're kind of just going to roll with it and follow it blindly, and just see where it goes from there. So the demo here is, for the second half of this talk, we're just going to do full surrender to the feminine. We're going to attempt to full surrender to the inner feminine, outer feminine, on multiple levels, and then let the chips fall as they may. Okay, so with that, I will invite Gary up. Gary, you there? Okay, great.
Hey, Artie.
Hey.
Hi, everyone.
I can hear you. Can everyone hear and see Gary? If not, I will watch the chat now.
Is this okay? Can everyone hear?
You look great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being
here. You can hear me, so I think I'll just start with the story. I'm not sure the visuals are clear, but
very good. No, you're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, Jean. Hi. Hi. Nice to be here. Right. So this is the story from, like you said, from the Mahabharata. Hey, Candice. Hi. And as per Indian tradition, it's a funny thing that in the Indian tradition, in the Hindu tradition of stories, there is this way of putting a story in a story in a story, and it's like a jewel box within a jewel box, and within a jewel box, you open one and you find another box, and then you open one, another box comes out, and you think that the box. The innermost box probably holds some kind of jewel, and it probably does. But the beauty of the whole thing is that, the boxes themselves are so ornate and so beautiful that you hold them like jewels. So there is, so there is that tradition where every story actually holds within it many, many stories, which are, beautifully mythopoetic in their own ways. And then they further hold or lead to, other stories. So in that tradition, I want to give the context of the main story that I'm going to talk about today by setting the context of the bigger story that contains it, right? And the bigger story is the story of Mahabharata, which is one of the two epics in the Indian tradition. And Mahabharata is essentially at the core, the story of 5 brothers who are exiled into the forest for 13 years by their cousins. And between these cousins, there's a kind of conflict going on for territory and kingdom. And these 5 brothers spend 13 years in the forest and then go back, and to rightfully claim their kingdom, they're denied their kingdom, so they have to go to war to get what is rightfully theirs. So this particular story, the main story that I want to say, happens when these brothers go into the forest and they meet some sages there in the hermitages, and they're distraught. They've lost everything they had. They've lost hope. There's 12 or 13 years of exile ahead of them, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know if there is any hope for them. And the sage who's talking to them gives them hope by reciting the story, by telling them that there have been people before you. And specifically in this case, there has been a woman who's had to go through all of these hardships. And not only did she manage to pass through them, unscathed, but she actually used that entire experience to restore and heal her entire family, everyone around her. So that is the story that I want to illustrate to you and let you know that you can get through this. And that's how the story begins. And the story is of this woman called Savitri, who was born a princess. Savitri's parents were king and queen of a kingdom called Madra. And for many, many years, the king and queen were childless. So they used to worship the sun god every day, hoping that one day they will be blessed with a child. And it so happens that finally they are blessed with a child, and a daughter is born. Right, so when they have this daughter, they're overjoyed. They're so happy. They shower her with love and, raise her with all of their love and the best of the things that they can provide. They bring her up with the best teachers that they can find. They give her education. She grows up learning all the skills and arts and sciences of the day. And when she grows up, she is this beautiful, capable, smart woman. And when she comes of age, the father starts thinking about her marriage. And traditionally in those times, how this was that, there would be suitors whenever there's a woman who came of age, there would be suitors lined up asking for her hand in marriage. So that's what the king thinks will happen. But the story makes a point here that Savitri is just so beautiful and also so intelligent and capable in every way that somehow the suitors don't come because, no one feels equal to it. So there's this extra worry on her father's head now that, there are no suitors and my daughter needs to get married. So what do I do? So, and this is beautiful. So he goes up to his daughter and says, I think it's time for you to get married. But since we have no suitors coming up, I think it's time for you to travel abroad and go looking for the man you wish to marry. You should choose your own husband. And okay, so Savitri sets out. She goes with her entourage and her chariot, and she travels abroad. She travels to new cities, to new kingdoms, meets kings and princes and sages, and she travels through forests, and she goes looking for the one man that she feels like is the best man for her. Meanwhile, at her father's palace, the divine sage Narada, he's a sage who belongs to the realm of the gods, but he also travels to all the other realms, and he's visited Savitri's father. And while they're having a conversation, he asks the father, any luck with finding a man for your daughter? Are you going to get her married? And the father says, well, she's traveling right now, even as we speak, and she's trying to find someone she likes. I hope that something comes out of it. And even as they're having this conversation, Savitri enters. She returns from her travels, and she greets her father and the sage. And when they ask her if she had any luck, she says, yes. When I was traveling, I went through this forest, and I found a hermitage. I met the sages there, but also I found this elderly couple living there with their son. And it so happens this elderly couple were king and queen of the country called Shalwa. But the king lost his eyesight, and therefore it became a weakness. So he was overthrown by another king. So he lost his kingdom. So now they live in exile in this forest with a young son, and the son has all the fine qualities that I would want in my husband. So that's the man I'm going to marry. And his name is Satyavan. And to translate from Sanskrit, Satyavan means the truthful one. So she says, I'm going to marry this man. And the king is happy that, she's found someone. But the moment the sage hears this, Narada hears this, his first reaction is, oh, that's unfortunate. So naturally, the king is worried. He goes, why do you say that? Is there something wrong? Is it the guy? I mean, is there something wrong with him? And Narada says, no, there's nothing wrong with the guy. The guy's great, just as your daughter says. He has all the fine qualities you would look for in a prince, in a young man, in a husband. He's great. But the unfortunate thing is that he is destined to die 1 year from now. He's destined to die. So when the king hears this, he turns to Savitri and says, I'd really advise you to reconsider your choice. If this is the case, and good that we know this in advance now, you've been warned. So is there any other man you've met on your travels? Would you like to change your mind? And even as he says this, he looks at Savitri's face and he knows her mind is made up. She's not going to change her mind. And she looks at both of them and says, well, it's good that I've had warning, but really no, that makes no difference. This is the man I choose and I want to marry him. So Narada looks at her and he realizes, okay, maybe this is destiny as well. So fine, I bless you both and I hope you have a happy life. And he leaves from there, and that's how Savitri and Satyavan get married. And as the year approaches, the day designated for his death comes closer, Savitri is nervous and she's worried. And on that day, when he's meant to die, he sets out to the forest because, they need firewood. So he says, I'm going to the forest and chop some wood. And Savitri says, can I come with you? And he says, all right. And they go to the forest. And through half the day, he says, there's this strange uneasiness I feel. I feel tired. So I just want to lie down for a while and take a nap. Is that okay? And she says, yeah, perfect. Just come lie down and put your head on my lap. And she knows what's coming. And he lies down and he goes to sleep. All right. And even as he falls asleep, Savitri looks up and she finds this image. There's an apparition in front of her. She finds the image of the god of death, Yama, in front of her. And he says, it's time, and I've come to take the soul of Satyavan. And he has this rope with him all the time, and the rope that he kind of ties up the soul and carries with him to the other world. And he does that. Savitri stands up and says, I'm coming with you. And Yama says, no, that's not how this works. It's time for me to take Satyavan back, but it's not time for you yet. You have a long life ahead of you. You should go home. And he starts walking, and he realizes after a while that there's footsteps behind him. He turns around and sees that Savitri is following him. So he's like, what are you doing? You should go back. And she says, no, I'm coming with you. You're taking my husband, and I go wherever he goes. So I'm coming with you. And Yama says, no, that's not how this works, but I really do admire the fact that you're so fearless. I mean, this has never happened to me. No one's ever followed me voluntarily and said, I'm coming with you. And you're so brave. I'm really impressed, but you must go home. And you know what? Because you've been so brave, I want to grant you a boon. I want to give you a boon. Ask me anything you like, right? Except for your husband's life, of course. That I cannot give. But anything that you would like, you can have it. And after that, you must go home. And when Yama says that, she says, oh, yes, there is one thing I'd like. Thank you very much. If it's possible, could you please restore the vision of my father-in-law? Could he have his eyesight back? And he says, no problem. You can have that. And now, please go home. Right? And he turns and starts walking, and he realizes she's not gone home. She's still following him. And then he turns around and says, well, you're still here. And she says to him, well, you're the god of death, but you're also god of dharma, right? Dharma being, the right way, the right path. He says, well, yes. Well, you're doing what your dharma says you should do. And, your dharma is to take the dead into the other realm, and you're doing that, and that's fine. And I, as a wife, have my dharma. I've chosen my husband, and I've vowed that I will be with him till the last moment. And I'm just following my dharma. There's really no problem. I'm not stopping you. But, you understand this. You're the god of dharma. And he's like, well, you really are a remarkably smart woman. I'm impressed. Right? But I can't yield to this. I still have to do what I have to do, like you said. And you can't come into the other realm. So, all right, if you want to keep this up as far as you can, go ahead. But really, you're a very wise woman. So I'm impressed. And I'd like to give you another boon. Ask for anything you like, except for your husband's life. And what do you want to have? Anything. And she says, well, actually, there is something. While we're at it, I'd really love to see my father-in-law as king once more. So could you restore his kingdom to him? And he says, done. That's not a problem. We could do that. And now, could you please go back home? And then he turns and starts walking, and he realizes Savitri is walking again. And, he's realized she's going to come as far as she can come because she's a mortal after all. There is a point where she has to turn around and go back. And, this is a remarkable woman, so why not I just indulge her? And he starts talking to her. They start having a conversation. And the more and more they talk, the more and more impressed he is with her intelligence, with her wisdom. And finally, they come to the point where she cannot follow them anymore. And he turns around and says, well, Savitri, you've come further than any mortal has. And this is it. You can't cross this line. But I am really, really impressed with you. So one final boon. I can't give your husband's life back, but you can ask for anything you want. And I notice you've been asking for things for your father-in-law, but what is it that you want? You can ask for anything. And Savitri says, well, you've been very kind. If I can really have anything I want, I would really love to have children. Please grant me the boon of having children. And Yama says, done. You can have that. That's no problem. And Savitri smiles at him and says, thank you very much. But you should know me by now. I love my husband. I chose my husband. There is never going to be any other man. And I'm not going to marry anyone else. So, if you really stand by your boon and stand by your words, if your boon has to manifest, you know what you need to do. At this time, Yama knows that he's been tricked, right? It's like, there's no way out of this tangle. I've really fixed myself up. So he says, okay, I can't really say anything else, and you've won. You really are a very clever woman. So there you go. I've decided to, release Satyavan, and you can take him back. That's it. And he unleashes, Satyavan from his rope. And he goes back. And a moment later, Savitri is sitting on the forest floor with her husband's head on the lap. And he wakes up from his sleep. And he says, I had quite a good nap. But I need to collect the rest of the firewood. And after that, let's go home. And they both go back home to realize his father can see again. And now that, Satyavan has had a new lease of life, quite literally, and then the father has, got back his vision, they are more than capable of taking on the enemy, and they go and, win back their kingdom. And the kingdom is restored. So then Savitri, through sheer grit and determination and her wisdom and fearlessness, ends up restoring vision, kingdom, authority, and all of that for her entire family. And they move out of exile. So that's the story. So it's really like the thing I love about the story is it's really like a template of what ideally the feminine can do when she is in her full power and her full avatar of having her own agency and operating with her full wisdom. To me, it's like the standard template. It's almost like a map showing that this is the power of the feminine. This is what she can do when she is given the car keys, like you say, Artie. So would you like to come and share your thoughts and what you read from the story? Let me see if Artie is back. Oh, there he is.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yay! Good job. Good job. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Good job. I'm so glad I had my microphone and video off because I was like laughing the whole time with delight.
Really?
So yeah, good job. Good. Thank you. I love that story. Yeah, should we spend a few minutes talking about it? How should we?
What do you
say?
read from?
What do we do?
Yeah, so what do you read from this? I would love to have your thoughts on how does the story speak to you, particularly because the way it speaks to me is I look at the story also as how the ideal feminine power comes through when the nurturing of the parents, and when you grow up, there is absolutely no shaming. There's no comparison to a male child. There is no, a girl is raised just as she would be raised, not
On her own terms.
On her own terms, not in relation to how she'd be raised as a male child, how she'd be raised, in a male world. None of that, no mention of it. So when this happens, the feminine grows into her power, and she has her own agency, and she has a wisdom, and she knows what she chooses. She knows how to stick with her choices. She knows how to handle things when things don't go, as planned. So to me, it's a powerful story, but that speaks about that in the ideal situation. So I'd like to know how it speaks to you, and what do you notice about it?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, the first thing I should probably just say what I usually say at the beginning of like reading a dream or a myth, right? Which is, you can read these stories at different levels, and of course, when this is told to children in profane Hindu society and culture, this is like a moralistic story of like, oh, a human woman should be loyal to her like husband and subservient even till death, and go in and bargain and save your husband even though he's like gotten himself into trouble. And in the end, it's like she's moved mountains and he's been napping the whole time.
Because that's what
and she's supposed to be okay with that, right? And that's not the level we're reading it.
Yeah.
It's not the profane human comedy. It's more the way to read a dream or a myth mythopoetically is to take every major actor as being the representative and avatar of a different part of your own inner self. So she here is the avatar of your own inner feminine, whether you're a man or a woman. And he and all the male characters are representative of different aspects of the single inner masculine within you, whether you are a man or a woman. And then you can say, for society, for humankind, this isn't the analog of the feminine within humankind. Vision, nurturing, women actually, girls actually, and then the masculine, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, you read it at that sort of macro mythopoetic level.
Right.
And then the notes I was just like writing notes as I was listening. I'll just make some comments. This to me is a story of the feminine, and just like an operating manual of how it works. Right? When your lawnmower is well oiled and in good working condition, this is how it will work, right? And you won't have any sort of issues. And so the how not a woman. I mean, you can read it that way, but the power of your own inner feminine, this is how it works, right? It's like a manual of how the feminine operates. Now, in the case of the masculine, what's happened here? He has literally lost vision.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about the role of the feminine as the holder of vision. He has lost vision. He's lost power and life force. Your kingdom, right, is your ego power in the world. Yeah. Lost all of that. You are literally in exile. So we're all frogs here. We're all frogs. And this is the story within the story. This is the story that the seers told the exiles.
Yes.
To give them basically a treasure map of like, well, if you want to get out of exile, you've got to unleash your own inner feminine properly. Yes. Properly. And they basically, it's a 1, 2, 3 color by numbers kind of thing. And when you pick the story, you're just like, well, this is the story that's come to mind. I don't know how this fits. And you told it, and we're like, okay, we maybe. And I was like, look up the rest of it and tell the full thing. And I've only heard the full thing here. And it feels like the story is speaking to us from your muse, right? Selected from your muse and given to you. We're the bunch of exiles. And the story is being given to us as a tonic in sacred space where we are in direct portal with her, to buck us up, just like the exiles, the brothers were bucked up by this. So for me, it's like, all right, then. So I take this as equal as any dream that an advisee would get that they bring to me. And the first thing is, you don't just cure it by walking up to the hospital or buying medicine. Right? I can't go to the pharmacy and just buy a bottle of inner feminine and drink it and be done. Right? This is what we were talking about this morning. A story like this is a seed, not a pill. Right. A pill you take, it's command and control. You nuke whatever's down there, and then you like carry on with your day unchanged. This is a seed where you swallow it. It takes time. It's not, you feel the effects within 20 minutes. It grows over time, and it transforms your entire being. Yeah. And the way the seed comes to you is you don't go out and control and acquire and conquer and extract the seed. The feminine chooses you. I didn't choose my muse. She came to me and informed me that this is what I was going to do. And it took me probably a decade to actually hear her and come around to getting it through my thick skull. Yeah. She chooses you or not. Yeah. And then you surrender to her. So this is a classic example of what I always say, what you said too, which is you find the power, the voice of your inner feminine. Yeah. And, you can do something in healing. I'm like, you can verify that it's her, confirm it, right? Yeah. And then once you confirm, that's it. You just hand over the car keys as much as you're able from a courage and fearlessness standpoint, right? Yeah. And if you unleash her and she doesn't appear to be doing anything, you don't prod her. It's like she's doing exactly what she wants to do if you're sitting still for another year, right? Okay. Right. The other aspect of this is that Savitri, so she's the feminine. So what do we know about her? Let's just observe her. Mm-hmm. First of all, the power of the feminine in her full form is equal to the gods. Yeah. She handles Yama just fine, even before she technically tricked him. Yeah. She handles him just fine. She is every bit his equal. And so much so that she would never even admit it, because she recognizes the order of things. I'm immortal, that's fine. Being immortal, but she's like the first among the mortals, right? Because Yama is like, no one's ever come this far. Yeah. She has no fear. She's willing to die and follow her husband into the other world. And this by her own choice. She chose her husband. Yes. She chose her husband. He didn't even know he was going to die. He's just, you mind if I take a nap? He's like, yeah, yes, dear. Okay, you go ahead and take a nap. I'll be here. And then all this stuff happens, and she just kind of takes care of it, right? Yeah. She converses with Yama like an equal. She asserts her desire. She's not shy about speaking her truth. Yeah. And ends up healing not only her husband, but gets her father-in-law. So the father-in-law and the husband are both the same inner masculine, just different aspects.
Different aspects of it, yeah.
So she restores vision and restores the kingdom, i.e. ego power, your capability, your ability to manifest, right? You got your kingdom now. You can start trading with the other kingdoms to manifest the vision. Whose vision? Of course, it's going to be her vision that gets manifested. Yeah. Yeah. Right. But to me, it's like, well, let me just see what other notes here. He has a short lifespan, so death in a dream is a symbol of transformation. Right. She chooses the inner masculine who is just on the brink of transformation. And her father, another inner masculine, is like, are you sure you could have it all? You could have everything. And she's like, no, this is my choice. Where she has her vision, and this is another character telling clue. She has her vision, not knowing he had a short life. Yeah. Then she was informed, and she says, I stand by my choice, which means her vision is not conditional. It is what it is. Yeah. It is what it is. There is no doubt. restores vision, restores ego power. And you might say, oh, well, that's great. Then I want to go to the pharmacy and I definitely want to buy a bottle of this to drink. And it's like, no, you don't understand at all. Yeah. She gets these boons, she gets the vision restored, and she gets the kingdom restored. But that's not why she went. Right? It's almost a mystery why she does all this. Right? The Indian patriarchy will be, well, because she's a good wife, and so if she did it, you should all be good wives too, and just not make trouble, right? Right. That's profaning sort of interpretation, but the sacred is like, we have no clue why. And that is how bliss feels. When you finally find your bliss, there is no justification. When we do the bliss program, we're always talking about what are the things you like for like no good reason. You cannot explain it. It's not because people clap and cheer when I do it. I just do it. If I had to pay and money was no object, I would pay to do it. And it makes no sense, but there it is. I like doing these things, so sue me. I can't really give any other justification. So that's how she acts too, for no reason. Yeah. And then the last couple thoughts I had here was, so for me, when I heard the story, in my like mythopoetic nerdy mode, I'm like looking at it with a microscope, trying to sort of glean more insights on like the nature of the muse, right? Because she's, Savitri is basically an analog for the muse as well, and I'm always looking for clues on, like, much to her annoyance. She's like, I already tell you what to do, just shut up and do it. And I'm like, but I want to know about you. Like, whatever, fine. And really interesting is how she manages to impress Yama with her conversation and her rhetoric. Right? So the feminine has the power to engage with the gods, liaise with the gods, and even bend rules in your favor. Even like putting a thumb on the scales of life unfairly in your favor, right? Right. If you're like smart enough to basically give her the keys and let her drive. Yes. That's why I'm like, if I need to ride in the trunk, I'll ride in the trunk. I just, I want to come with, right? I want to come with. So that very much resonated as with my own direct experience with the muse. Like, she's pulling all these levers, tilting things unfairly in my favor. And I'm just like, I don't even know. I'm just hanging on for dear life at this point, And so it's so beautiful. And so my big curiosity, which of course the story shrouds in mystery, is right. Before the third boon, Yama's like, okay, well, walk with me. And they're talking for, this is mythic time. So in real time, it could have been like decades, right? They're just talking together. Right. Endlessly. And what I'm like endlessly curious about is like, what are they even talking about? What does he even have to converse about with the god of death? Like, oh yeah, and like Apollo, let me tell you what Apollo told me the other day. And it's like, he's so whatever. And it's just this gossip. And how do you even hold your end of the conversation with a god like that? And then even to the point where he's just like so delighted. He's like, I don't even know how you got to be immortal. I'll need to check the records and how this state of affairs came about. And she's like, no, that's fine. And he's like, oh, she's even okay with being immortal, right? And in the end, when she does kind of dupe him, right? This is the kind of thing where it's like, he's the god of death. He knows she's duping him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, we're like, oh, haha, humans have some recourse against the gods. It's not this confrontational thing. Like, he's totally like, you're spitting with him. He's like, you are just my favorite. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but you're my favorite daughter. Oh my gosh, you're the best, right? And she's like, well, how about if I have kids? And he can put 2 and 2 together. It's not even 5 chess moves ahead. It's like 1 chess move ahead. It's obvious you're like trying to mate my queen, right? So it's like, oh, so you want to have kids? And he's like, I can see where this is going. All right. I will grant you the boon. And she's like, well, you know what that means. And he's like, yes, yes. Oh, I can't believe you've duped me. And of course, if he were really pissed, he could like incinerate her in an instant. But he's like, all right, that's fine. You can have him back. And this whole time he's like cursing and swearing. This is the rule of heaven. This is the rule of whatever. Nothing else can happen. But it's like when you go to a hotel and they're like, you know, do you have a room? It's like, I'm sorry, monsieur, we are completely booked for the next 3 weeks. And then they realize something about you, that they just like you. And it's like, well, I think I do have one room where I have an opening for you. They always keep something in reserve, right? All the power players always keep something in reserve. So they have that degree of freedom. And the fact that Yama like gave her the presidential suite that he keeps, because this is not just breaking some random rule. This is breaking, I mean, the logos and mythos, the law that defines his very existence as a, you know, deity and a power of nature. And he violates it because that's how powerful the feminine is. I mean, there are other myths that we've like nerded out about where it's like all the gods are gathered and there's this feminine figure and they all challenge her and they can't, you know, the god of wind can't even blow a straw when she puts it in front of him.
Yeah.
You know, and then they come with more reverence the second time around. It's like, may we know your name? And she goes off on this like explanation of like, I am the ground from which the gods come. It's the goddess of love that we read in the Upanishads, right? I'm the thing from which the gods themselves come. That's the feminine.
Yeah.
The feminine is not the moon to the sun. The feminine is versus the masculine sun, all of black space from which the sun emerges.
Yeah.
So I love that story. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you for the. I was particularly struck by the point where you said is that, you know, she is able to kind of even bend the rules and she also kind of delivers the vision and you just follow what she says. And the thing that struck me is when, you know, we attempt to find our vision and find our bliss, one of the first things, the first blocks that we find is, oh, can I really do this? It's a lot of self-doubt, right? Oh, can I really do this? Is this really even humanly possible? Is it, I mean, can I even match up to this kind of expectation? And all sorts of self-doubt. And the answer to that most of the times is just you know, just trust your muse.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you can or cannot, you have the ability or not, is not even the question, because if she wants it and she wants it to get done through you, she will get it done through you. All you have to do is give your consent,
right?
You know, to go along with her. So,
and she has kind of style too. You know, in the end, she's like bent the rules of the universe, and everyone is just smitten and charmed. Even the god of death is like he's just gaga.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, yeah, it's just amazing. And I think there's a question saying, is the muse the same as the inner feminine? I think, what do you think? There's a whole overlap there where.
Yeah, so for me, in a healing context, inner feminine will have multiple faces, just like the inner masculine showed up as the husband, as her father, as his father.
Yeah.
And the muse for me is like one possible face of the inner feminine. Right, in fairy tales, you have the princess, you have the evil stepmother, you have the good mother who always dies right in the beginning, right? You have the sisters, you have the good sisters, bad sisters. You have helpful animals that come.
Yeah.
So the muse is an aspect of the inner feminine, is the way I would characterize that.
Yeah. So that was really insightful. Thank you, Artie.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anything else to add?
I think that's a lot of things even for me to digest for the moment. And telling the story has been like so powerfully insightful for me again, even though I knew the story. So that's like, it's amazing. I know it, and still when I'm telling it, there are a lot of things that like come to me as if it's coming to me for the first time. So it's a lot to digest.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So for everyone, actually, Gary and I were talking this morning, and we were thinking for future live sacred space sessions, we might do a format sometimes where the session, instead of like a talk and me just going on and on, we actually like tell a story, and then we do all of this, as well as like the main sacred sort of exercise of the session. So if you have thoughts about that, email me. Let me know if you like that. If you have stories that you find near and dear to your heart and are interested in, send them, and maybe we'll put that in the queue for looking at. But yeah, we're thinking this might be a fun direction for us to go in, because I've already said, after a pandemic is over or calmed down, I think we would like to continue doing this, and doing a formal talk every week is just going to get really old, really fast for everyone. So we'll try to make it, more mythopoetic and imagistic.
And also the other thing I want to say is that, there've been a lot of questions that, have been piling up, like 2 or 3 every week. And there was some, for about 3 weeks now. And if we've missed any questions today, so we'll kind of pile them up. And one of the short story sessions, probably next week, I'm not sure, we'll just time that up. And then we'll put them all together and get, even if they're from different topics and different, talks, so that we'll try to address them in the session. So we could do that, right?
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, great. So good. Thank you, everyone. And I'll go ahead and close the session now. Yeah, you think? Okay. All right. So our next session is Sunday. Next Sunday, it's free, open to everyone. Please invite others, ask questions, and we'll sort of gather them up and answer them in the session. And so I'll close the session. And I want to just say thank you all for being with me here today, and for all of your support and love. Thank you, Gowrie, for taking us through the story and guiding us, and doing a little bit of a meta demonstration of surrendering to the feminine. And so for now, I will hereby close this session of our sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me, with us, and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, free of shame, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day. Have a great week. Be safe, take care of each other, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you. Thank you.